Today, what we're going to learn is how to multiply brackets with surds. Now we have already learned the methods for multiplying a single bracket and a double bracket, and the same methods are used when the brackets include surds. So if we start with example 1, what we want to do is take root 3 and multiply that by the bracket to take away the root of 2. So what that means is that the root 3 multiplies everything inside the bracket. So the root 3 will multiply that 2, and the root 3 will multiply that negative root 2. Now, the reason why I use a grid is because it keeps your answers nice and neat. So, the root 3 goes on the outside, and the two terms in the bracket go above. Now what I want to do first when I'm expanding this bracket is take the root 3 and multiply that by the 2. So if I take root 3 and I multiply that by 2, then what I get as an answer is 2 root 3. So that would be the answer in the first box. The second part involves taking this root 3 again and multiplying it by negative root of 2. Now, what I find is easier is to establish in the first instance if in fact your answer is positive or negative. Now, if the root 3 is positive and the negative root 2 is negative, I know if I multiply a positive by a negative, then the answer is negative. So what I start by doing is writing in that that is negative, and then what I want to do underneath is just take the two surds and multiply these together. Now if I take root 3 and I multiply by root 2, then I know that's the same as putting these two numbers under the one root sign. So the root of 3 times 2, I know that 3 times 2 is 6, so the answer is the square root of 6. And again, because one is positive and one is negative, the answer is the negative root of 6. What that then means in terms of your answer is that if you take root 3 and you multiply by 2, take away the root of 2, then the answer is equal to 2 root 3 take away root 6. And that is in fact your answer. There may be occasions where you might have to simplify, but I know because 3 and 6 cannot be simplified down any further, then that is in fact the answer. I can't add these terms together because they are not like terms. Now the second example, slightly more complicated because of the 2 in front of the root this time, but what I want to do is take 2 root 5 and multiply that out by 4 add on 3 root 5. So the 2 root 5 goes here, and again I want to multiply by 4 add on 3 root 5. Now, in a similar way to the last time, what I want to start with is taking the 2 root 5 and multiplying that by the 4. Now, if I do the working for that underneath, I know that 4 times 2 root 5 is equal to 8 root 5, because 4 times 2 is 8. So that means 4 multiplied by 2 root 5, or 2 root 5 multiplied by 4, is 8 root 5. Now the second multiplication that I need to do is taking this 2 root 5 again and multiplying it by 3 root 5. Now I know that a positive times a positive is always a positive. Now I'll put that positive in here, Some of you will ask if that's necessary. It isn't necessary, but it just reminds me that the answer here is positive. So if I now take 2 root 5 and multiply that by 3 root 5, then what I can do is take the number part first and say, okay, 2 times 3 is 6. And then I can multiply the two roots. And I can say, okay, root 5 times root 5. Now, what you should have learned previously is that if you take a root and you multiply it by itself, then what you effectively end up with is a number on its own without the root sign. So if I take the root of 5 and I multiply it by the root of 5, that's like saying the root of 5 times 5. We know that that's the root of 25, and the root of 25 is in fact 5. So what that means is that root 5 multiplied by root 5 is just 5. Now I would expect you to be able to do that part in your head, and therefore know that 6 multiplied by 5 is 30. So if I then take that 30 and I write it in the box up here, 2 root 5 multiplied by 3 root 5 is positive of 30. That means your answer becomes 8 root 5 add on 30. Now, what these two previous examples, or what these two examples have in common, is that both of them is one term that multiplies one bracket. The next two examples involve the use of double brackets, 2 brackets. So if I take example 3, what I want to do is take 4, add on 2 root 3 and multiply that by 3, take away the root of 3. Now this time our grid has to have another 2 rows, and that becomes nice and clear when you start to write out the terms that you're multiplying by. So the first bracket is 4, add on 2 root 3, and you're multiplying that by 3, take away the root of 3. Now the fact that you've got a negative term there means you should err on the side of caution when expanding your bracket out. Now what I would like to do initially is take the 4 and multiply by 3. Now what I know is that 4 multiplied by 3 is 12. So that's your first term. What I want to do is take the 4 again, multiply that by the negative root of 3. Now again, we know that 4 times negative root of 3 means it's a positive multiplied by a negative, so the answer is going to be a negative. And if I then take the 2 number parts, or the 4, and I multiply that by the root of 3, then what I get is 4 root 3. And it's a 4 root 3 again, that goes in here, but keep in mind that it is negative. If I take now the 2 terms underneath, what I now want to do is take the positive 2 root 3 and multiply that by this 3 again. Now if I take positive 2 root 3, so if I take the positive 2 root 3, let's make that black, 2 root 3 and multiply that by 3, then I know that 2 root 3 multiplied by root 3 is 6 root 3, and that's because 2 times 3 is 6. A positive times a positive remains positive. And if I then take the last 2 terms to multiply, I want to take the 2 root 3 again and multiply it by the negative root 3. Now what I notice is that the 2 root 3 is positive, the negative root of 3 is negative, a a positive multiplied by a negative is a negative. Now if I multiply now the two parts together, 2 root 3 times root 3, with like an imaginary 1 here in front of the root 3, so what I would be saying here is that 2 times 1 is just 2, or it's like saying 2 times root 3 times root 3. Now just like in the example above, I know that root of 3 times root of 3 is actually just 3, and that 2 times 3 is equal to 6. And again, because one is positive and one is negative, the answer is negative 6. Now, when I look at my grid, what I then want to be able to do is make sure that there aren't any like terms that I can collect together. Now what you'll notice here is that you have, oops, daisies, let's put that 12 back in. So what you'll notice here is that you have a 12 and you have a negative 6. These are like terms, so I know that 12 take away 6 leaves me with 6. And if I look at the next two terms, what I have is 6 root 3 and I take away 4 root 3. Because both of these terms share a root 3, that means they are like terms. So 6 root 3 adding on a negative 4 root 3 leaves me with 2 root 3, and that is positive. So the answer becomes 6 add on 2 root 3. And again, that 2 root 3 comes from grouping together the 6 root 3 with the negative 4 root 3. Now, admittedly, that one is a bit more complicated than the examples before, but this is the standard eventually we want you to be getting to. Now, the fourth example involves squaring a bracket. So what we want to do is take 3, subtract the root of 5 and square it. Now the first thing you have to recognise is that squaring a bracket doesn't mean you just square the two terms inside the bracket, because what you should know is if you square a bracket or a term, any number, you multiply that by itself. So what this actually means is 3 take away the root of 5 multiplied by itself, which is 3 take away the root of 5. So it's not squaring the 3 and the negative root 5 individually, it's multiplying that bracket by itself. So what that means on the outside here, I've got 3 take away the root of 5, and on the top I've also got 3 take away the root of 5, because both of the brackets are the same. Now if I start with multiplying the top row first, what I want to do is take the 3, multiply it by the 3, and I know that 3 times 3 is of course 9. Now you should be able to do that in my head. I wouldn't expect you to have to write that down underneath. You can if you want to. What I want to do next is take the 3 and multiply it by the negative root of 5. Now again, that's a positive multiplied by a negative. A positive multiplied by a negative will be a negative. And what I know is that 3 multiplied by the root of 5 is 3 root 5. So the answer on the top row here is a 9, and you're taking away 3 root 5. If I now go to the bottom row, what I now want to do is multiply by the negative root of 5. So what I want to do firstly is take the negative root of 5 and multiply that by this 3. Now again, I know that the answer is going to be negative, because a positive multiplied by a negative is negative. And I know from down here that 3 times root 5 is in fact 3 root 5. So the answer in this box is negative 3 root 5. Now the final thing that I want to multiply is the negative root 5 multiplied by the negative root 5. Now I know that a negative multiplied by a negative is in fact a positive, and again you don't have to write that positive sign in. I'm just doing it to be consistent with the previous examples. And I know that if I want to take the square root of 5 and multiply it by the square root of 5, then what I get is 5. And again, that's because the root of 5 times the root of 5 is the same as saying the root of 5 multiplied by 5. We know that 5 multiplied by 5 is 25, and therefore the square root of 25 is in fact 5. So the answer in the last box is positive 5. What we now want to do is look at grouping together like terms. So if I start with the number parts on its own, I know that I have a 9 and a positive 5, and I know that 9 add on 5 is equal to 14. And if I then take the two parts that have the surds, since both of them contain a root 5, these are like terms, so I know that negative, that should be negative 3 root 5 in there. So what I know is, second time lucky, is that negative 3 root 5 add on negative 3 root 5 is negative 6 root 5. So what I write over here is 14 take away 6 root 5. Now that means 14 take away 6 lots of the root 5. You don't do 14 subtract 6 is 8, so the answer is 8 root 5. That's as far as your answer can go, because 14 and the 6 root 5 are not like terms.